Venezuela, peace and tranquility reign nationwide as citizens prepare for the legislative and regional elections this Sunday, May 25th. In Palestine, the Israeli regime continues to attack Palestinian families across Gaza, killing at least 8 in its most recent airstrikes. And Russian army liberates several towns in Sumy and Donetsk regions amid the special military operation. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Venezuela prepares for the legislative and regional elections this coming Sunday, May 25th. Over 21 million Venezuelans are called to vote in the election of 569 positions, including 24 governors, 285 National Assembly deputies, and 260 Legislative Council representatives. Delegations from several countries have also arrived in Venezuela to observe the elections, including representatives from Turkey, South Africa, Laos, Belarus, Serbia and Nicaragua. A total of 54 organizations with political aims are participating in the elections, including 36 national organizations, 10 regional organizations, 3 national indigenous organizations as well, and 3 regional indigenous. In this regard, citizens of Tumeremo, the administrative capital of Guyana Esequiba, are ready to participate in this democratic event to elect the first governor after its establishment as a state following the consultative referendum held on December 3, 2023. Meanwhile, Táchira enjoys total peace and quiet on the eve of the regional and legislative elections. In preparation for the polls, the governor has implemented a security plan with the closing of the borders and allowing citizens who need to carry out procedures to move around. Let's go over what Venezuelans are voting for on Sunday, May 25th.
With 100% of the 27,713 polling stations installed, more than 21,300,000 citizens are eligible to vote for deputies to the National Assembly and 19,500,000 for governors and legislative council in the 24 states. For the day, a total of 36 national political parties, 10 regional organizations, and 8 indigenous organizations were authorized to participate in the regional and legislative elections. To that end, the National Electoral Council received a total of 36,986 nominations, corresponding to 6,867 candidates for popularly elected positions. 569 candidates will be elected, of which 285 are for National Assembly members, 20 for governors, and 260 legislators in each state. For this electoral process, the governor of the state of Guyana Esequiba and regional deputies will be elected for the first time, positions created after the approval of the organic law for the defense of the Esequibo, in dispute with the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, which usurps the territory and which Venezuela legally claims.
In Colombia on Friday, the government announced it had reached a peace agreement with the 33rd Gentle Duarte Front, a FARC dissident group, which temporarily will be relocated in the north of Santander department, northeast of the country. According to Executive Resolution 161, signed by President Gustavo Petro, a temporary location zone will be established in the rural area of the municipality of Tibú. The objective of this temporary settlement is to facilitate the peace process and guarantee that the members of the front transition to civilian life. This government resolution vacates previous arrest warrants and establishes an initial 45-day term for the relocation area as of the entry into force of the above-mentioned resolution. On Friday, in the city of Barranca Bermeja, in the department of Santander, northeastern Colombia, President Gustavo Petro led a ceremony to grant ownership over 4,500 hectares of land to peasant communities affected by the armed conflict. After the formal ceremony of granting land ownership over lands that were recovered by the state from usurpation and paramilitary control, President Petro urged people to continue fighting for their rights, for, he said, there has been no justice in Colombia. He also made reference to the referendum promoted by his government, which failed to pass last March 14th in Congress, and he asked people to mobilize against the fraud aiming at thwarting the proposed referendum.
In essence, in Magdalena Medio del Sur, a political genocide was carried out against Colombian peasants. That's where they learned about genocide. That's where it began, hopefully, the last years of 100 years of solitude. Because what people went through in Magdalena Medio is like 100 years of solitude. Justice was not served despite the allegations raised. There was no judicial verification. The confessions of members of that alliance were disregarded.
And now we have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates and more. We'll be right back, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. On Saturday morning, at least 8 Palestinians were killed and several wounded following a new series of Israeli airstrikes across Gaza. In Al-Amal neighborhood, a family of 4, including 2 children, were killed when a drone hit their home. A similar attack on another family home in the Nuseirat refugee camp left 2 people dead and several wounded. The Gazan Health Ministry issued a statement detailing that the toll due to the Israeli genocide rose to 53,822 Palestinians killed and 122,382 wounded. In southern Gaza, a pediatrician lost 9 of her 10 children during an Israeli bombardment on the house she was treating them. Civil defense authorities reported that the Israeli raid destroyed the residential area of Kizan al-Najjar in Khan Yunis city, where a large fire was reported. During relief efforts, rescue workers recovered the lifeless bodies of the children, 8 of whom were shared. So far, the Israeli aggression has claimed 53,900 lives and wounded 122,593 others. The Palestinian government has condemned the scale of violence carried out by Israeli settlers against their nationals in the occupied West Bank. Palestinian authorities denounce Israel is trying to wipe Palestinians off the area, favoring settlers with the support of Prime Minister Netanyahu. They also recall recent incidents in the town of Brooklyn, where Zionist troops assaulted civilians and burned vehicles. Palestinian officials further point to these actions as a violation of international laws and norms. Therefore, they urge the international authorities to take on legal and moral responsibility over Israel to stop the escalation of aggressions. Several Palestinians and soldiers claim that Israeli troops systematically force Palestinians to act as human shields in the Gaza Strip, sending them inside buildings to check for danger. Witnesses told the media that the practice has become ubiquitous in Gaza over 19 months of war. At least 7 Palestinians described being used as shields in Gaza and the occupied West Bank as well. Israeli soldiers affirmed the use of human shields, adding that the practice sped up operations, saved ammunition, and prevented combat dogs from being wounded or killed. Paradoxically, the Israeli military claims it forbids the use of civilians as human shields and blames Hamas militants for the death of civilians in its Gaza offensive, which has killed tens of thousands of Palestinians. Hundreds of Israeli citizens gathered near the Gaza Strip border to call for an end to the conflict between Israel and Hamas. On Friday, demonstrators denounced Zionist aggressions against Palestinians, warning that the level of violence could not continue for another day. They chanted peace slogans such as Palestinian Lives Matter and called for peace and equity in the territories. Following the humanitarian crisis faced by the enclave due to the blockade of basic supplies entering the Gaza Strip, international organizations condemned the Israeli operation. In Paris, hundreds of protesters rallied against the genocidal offensive by the Israeli forces on the Gaza Strip. Demonstrators marched on the main avenues of the capital city, carrying banners in support of the Palestinian cause and chanting slogans that labeled as genocidal the Israeli aggressions. Likewise, they condemned the full blockade of the border crossing that denied the entry of humanitarian aid to the enclave. They further denounced that such siege made worse the humanitarian crisis faced by thousands of Palestinians. Overall, demonstrators demanded the immediate cessation of military operations against Palestinian civilians. The Russian army liberates several towns in Sumy and Donetsk regions amid special military operation. The Russian Defense Ministry has announced that the military operation successfully advanced, taking control of the Loknia village in Sumy province in Ukraine. They also said that the southern and eastern battalions occupied the Stupkorki and outran Novi villages in Donetsk. The Russian Defense Ministry also reported that the Ukrainian army has lost 1,330 troops in the Central Front and 280 in the Southern Front. The Russian armed forces have launched a coordinated attack on military targets in Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. Early on Saturday, Ukraine reported that its capital region was under one of the biggest attacks since 2022. Hours later, Moscow announced a joint attack on key military sites. According to the Ministry of Defense, precision ground weapons and unmanned aerial vehicles hit a military-industrial complex, a radio reconnaissance center, and a position of the Patriot missile system. Russia has promised a strong response following Kyiv's latest drone strike, the 1,100th since the start of the war. On Saturday, a plane carrying 307 Russian military personnel who were released on the second day of a prisoner's swap with Russia landed in Moscow, the capital of Russia. The soldiers were flown from Belarus, where the exchange took place. Some will undergo treatment and rehabilitation at Ministry of Defense medical centers. One of the released soldiers expressed his gratitude to the Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Belarusian counterpart Alexander Lukashenko for helping them through this ordeal. On May 16th, the Russian and Ukrainian delegations resumed direct dialogue in Turkey, with one of the first agreements being the large-scale prisoner exchange. In Asia, Golden Dragon 2025 joint exercise, a military exchange event between Cambodian and Chinese forces, moves forward. With more than 2,000 participants, Beijing and Phnom Penh mobilized state-of-the-art military weapons and equipment, including artificial intelligence for combat training. As part of cooperation in the fight against terrorism and for humanitarian aid, both countries conduct operations on land, at sea, and in the air. Golden Dragon 2025 began on May 14th, providing for military exercises at two training centers of the Royal Gendarmerie of Cambodia, a country allied with the government of China. BRICS member countries agreed on an action plan for the development of small and medium-sized enterprises during the period 2025-2030 at a meeting held in Brasilia between the members of the economic bloc and businessmen. They reaffirmed their cooperative relations with a view to increasing their participation in global value chains. For the BRICS, these negotiations increase the sustainability of national economies, they create new jobs and promote innovations in the manufacturing sector. The parties agreed to coordinate working groups to exchange best practices in technical cooperation and to support the participation of small and medium-sized enterprises in international events. Let's now take our second and final short break, but before we invite you to tune in this Saturday 8 p.m. Caracas time for a special interview with St. Kitts and Nevis Prime Minister Terence Drew. That's 8 p.m. Caracas time this Saturday, special interview with Prime Minister Terence Drew only on teleSUR English. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to From the South. In Cuba, the national initiative to strengthen response capabilities in the event of natural, technological and health disasters, Meteoro 2025, is being carried out this weekend. Meteoro 2025 began with a national deployment led by President Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermúdez. The activity in its 39th edition seeks to strengthen the capacity to respond to emergencies and natural disasters in a context marked by economic challenges. According to the Chief of the National Civil Defense General Staff, Major General Ramón Pando Guerra, the exercise will allow to evaluate in an objective way the vulnerabilities, the degree of exposure of the population, and the economic and natural resources to hazards, besides optimizing the protocols of action in a scenario of economic complexity. Thousands of Panamanians mobilized again this Friday against the repressive policies of President José Raúl Mulino. The coastal avenue of the country's capital was filled with colors and slogans. They accused the repressive drift of the government of President Mulino, who has already imprisoned 2 union leaders and has forced a third to take refuge at the Bolivian embassy. For more than a month, Panamanians have been demonstrating against the approval of the Social Security Fund law, against mining, for respect to national sovereignty, the protection of rivers, and against censorship, hatred, and criminalization of protest. In this context, the government imprisoned Genaro López and Jaime Caballero, historic leaders of the Construction Workers' Union, one of the most important in the country, and forced the General Secretary Saúl Méndez to ask for asylum. The Bolivian Foreign Ministry announced Friday to be aware of the asylum request presented by Saúl Méndez, leader of the Single National Union of Construction and Similar Industry Workers, before its embassy in Panama. The Foreign Ministry said in a statement that the request is already in the corresponding authority and is being processed in accordance with the deadlines and procedures established by the regulations in force. The ministry also stressed that international relations regarding refuge and asylum remain fully in force between Bolivia and Panama. The Soundtrack's leader has been staying at the Bolivian embassy in Panama City since May 22nd. On Friday in Bolivia, in an address on national television, President Luis Arce announced a few measures and decrees to guarantee a regular supply of fuel and food items across the country. In total, he announced 11 measures and 7 decrees aimed at alleviating the situation arising from a severe fuel shortage. The president, accompanied by members of his cabinet, announced a militarization of the borders, incentives for production, the import of poultry, and he also promised full fuel supply to the central axis of the country. He also announced the creation of a national program to boost corn and rice production, and he said that as of next Monday, fuel distribution will be back to normal in the departments of La Paz, Santa Cruz, and Cochabamba. The U.S. government issued a general license to ease sanctions against Syria after U.S. President Donald Trump reached an agreement with a former member of Al-Qaeda who is currently the de facto leader of the country. In this regard, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that sanctions relief is crucial for the country to move forward, increase investments and cash flow. Likewise, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said they are implementing authorizations to encourage new investments. Yet, we must remember that the U.S. tightened sanctions amid Syria's war against Daesh terrorists and during the COVID-19 pandemic under the government of Bashar al-Assad. In China, the 21st International Cultural Industries Fair has kicked off. This time, the focus is on artificial intelligence and technological innovations. Over 6,000 government delegations, cultural institutions and companies are attending this year's edition to promote cinematographic development in the region. The festival showcases over 120,000 products and over 4,000 investment projects, including one that replaces green screen with real-time AI-generated environments visible to both actors and directors during filming, thus reducing costs. According to the organizers, over the next 5 days, they expect over 35,000 visitors and the participation of over 300 exhibitors to contribute to the international promotion of Chinese culture. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok as well. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.